Hi there. Today we're at the two Creulets. Creullet with a Y and a Creullet with a T. There's two chateaus. One behind me dates from the 11th century, the oldest part, and the one over there is the 17th century. Now here there was the BBC and General Montgomery, and many other things happened. So that's Creullet Chateau with a Y. That was built by one of the enemies of William the Conqueror in the 11th century. It was added to a lot in the 13th century. And over here is Creullet Chateau with a T. And that became Montgomery's headquarters. Now some officers landed on the 6th to prepare Monty's HQ. Now the first choice was the presbytery or the vicarage at St. Croix, which is this building here. They spent the night here, but then Colonel Russell decided that it wasn't a good place because it was surrounded by bomb craters. So he sent off Lieutenant Colonel Mather to find the second choice, which was Creullet. Lieutenant Colonel Mathers and Warren, they came here in a jeep to find this place. They pushed open the gate, drove up the alley to the chateau, and there was a maid at the first floor window, the window upstairs that is, and she was pointing to an outhouse or a barn. So they opened the door of the barn and there were 30 German soldiers in there. In fact, they were Russians in the German army. And they'd actually been told by their German officers to set fire to St. Croix, and they decided they wouldn't and killed their officer with a spade and deserted and were hiding in that barn. And so they took them prisoner. Then they marched them off to St. Croix where there was a prison compound. Then they went back to the chateau. Then the owner was there, Madame de Druval, and they asked her if they could use the chateau. She said, of course you can. Now they were being polite because they're going to use it anyway, but they asked, and she said, of course. And so they prepared it for Monty's HQ. The 4-7 Royal Dragoon Guards, they landed on Gold Beach, many of them in DD tanks. Now their tanks, the DD tanks, they did a deep wade rather than being launched 3 miles out. So that meant the landing craft came into the shallow water and the tanks came out and waded through the water. So there were a few casualties. Now they had Firefly tanks as well. They couldn't be converted to DD tanks. The 17-pounder gun was too big, so they had to be brought in to the beach anyway. And because they came through Creullet, liberated Creullet, as the Canadians liberated Creullet, there's this memorial to them here at Creullet, just below the chateau. At the crossroads between Crépin and Creullet, the 4-7 Dragoon Guards tanks arrived. They saw a German staff car coming from the west and they fired on it and the car crashed. There was a German medic officer in it, dead. Then the tanks continued down the winding road towards Creullet Chateau and then this way towards Creullet. Now there was a scare when the Panther tank was reported on the bridge, but the tank pulled back and so they carried on. After crossing the bridge, they wound their way up this road under the chateau into the village. Now the Royal Winnipeg Rifles were coming from Juno Beach, accompanied by the tanks. And Major Lockie Fulton told Lieutenant Mitchell to cross the bridge and take it. And as he was on the bridge, a machine gun opened up and two men next to him were cut down. His hand was clipped, but he stayed on the bridge, ripping up mines and throwing them in the river. Then he beckoned to a tank to come up, and that was Lieutenant McCormick in his tank. He went onto the bridge using his periscope, and the periscope was hit so he couldn't see anything, and so he got the tank to reverse back over the bridge and then go forward over the bridge with the machine guns, the bow gun and the turret machine gun firing to the sides, and just like that they managed to eliminate the German machine gun. As McCormick's tank moved up the road by the church, he thought the opening in the steeple would make a good sniper position. The tank brought down the steeple. A 20mm machine gun fired from the corner of the building before being obliterated by McCormick's gunner. That was the end of resistance in Creullet. McCormick told Fulton he would carry on with his tanks at a safer, faster speed. You can see the story of McCormick's ride in the video on Juno Beach. The BBC arrived. They installed their base in a field between here and the river. It was all brought in a 3-ton truck. Now they were finding difficulty in recording with all the noise of the battle going on, the guns, so they needed a studio. So by the 8th of June, they found Frank Gillard. He started using the room on top of the Chateau. Montgomery moved into his HQ at Creullet on the 7th. Now on the 10th, Montgomery wanted to have a meeting and broadcast to the troops and the nation. So Frank Gillard went to the Chateau of Creullet, and but he said to Montgomery, he said, "I haven't got a mobile recorder, so I can't record." But then he found one from a colleague, but then that wasn't working. But then he saw there was a telephone in Monty's caravan, and he asked Monty if he could use it. And so he called up the war room in England, and he said, "Can I have the BBC, please?" So they put him onto the BBC, and he said, "This is Frank Gillard." He said, "I want to broadcast." They said, "There's no channels available." He said, "One of them have to go." So in 30 minutes, Monty was talking to the troops and the nation through a telephone to the BBC. A week later, Montgomery had 3 visits from important people. Winston Churchill landed on the 12th of June on Juno Beach, 6 days after D-Day. If he'd had his way, he would have landed here on D-Day itself. Towards the end of May, Churchill informed the Admiralty that he intended to witness D-Day firsthand from the bridge of HMS Belfast. The idea of Britain's wartime leader placing himself in such danger was alarming, but it wasn't until King George VI intervened in 2 separate letters. The second, dated as late as the 2nd of June 1944, when he threatened to attend as well. So then Churchill agreed to back down. De Gaulle landed at Courseulles 2 days later on the 14th and was driven to Creullet by the Canadian Major Sanderson. As they left the chateau, Montgomery said to take de Gaulle back to the ship. As soon as they got out of the grounds, de Gaulle said, "We'll go to Bayeux." So Sanderson had no choice but to go to Bayeux. He stopped the jeep at the end of Rue Saint-Jean, and de Gaulle strode up the road amongst the excited crowd. They at last could put a face to the voice they'd heard on the BBC. He walked up the main street and then along Rue de General Days, across the Place du Chateau to the sub-prefecture. Then he came back to the square, and under the trees, to give some protection against a possible bombing raid, he made a speech to the population. The square is now Place du General de Gaulle. After leaving Bayeux, de Gaulle visited the small village of Vissigny-sur-Mer, located on a strategic point between the beaches of Utah and Omaha. Up to 80% of the village had been destroyed by devastating firepower of the American Navy. He then continued on to Grand-Comte-les-Bains, west of Pointe du Hoc. This was also liberated, along with Isigny, on the 8th of June. After this, de Gaulle returned to Churchill to board the Combattant and returned to the port of Portsmouth, England. Today, a cross of Lorraine, installed in 1990, stands at the limit of two communes of Churchill and Grès-sur-Mer on the sand dunes. It's 18 metres high and symbolises the return of General de Gaulle to French soil on the 14th of June 1944. This date was also 4 years, almost to the day, after his exile to London, from where he launched his appeal of the 18th of June. On the 16th, King George VI and Admiral Ramsay, Allied Naval Commander Expeditionary Force, came ashore at Mike Green Beach at Grès-sur-Mer on a duck. The King was met by General Montgomery. After lunch at Creullet, there was an investiture ceremony in the grounds in which the King, assisted by Major General de Guingard, decorates Major Keller, 3rd Canadian Division Commander, and officers and NCOs attached to Montgomery's staff. He then sets off to Lieutenant General Dempsey to the 2nd Army HQ at Banville, where they are met by Dempsey's Chief of Staff, Brigadier Chilton. Flanked by 2 army commanders, the King poses for the cameraman. He visited the new Admiralty HQ at Churchill before he and Ramsay set off for HMS Arethusa. After the King's visit, the papers were full of it. The Germans knew where Montgomery's HQ was and sent a bomber to attack. No damage was done, but Montgomery had to move. His next HQ was at Blaye, near the boundary between the British and Americans.